All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the webinar. Tonight, we're going to hear from Justin Nabity from Physicians Thrive, and I look forward to introducing you to him here in just a few minutes. Please note that tonight's webinar is going to be recorded. While everyone's logging on, I do want to take a moment to introduce myself. My name is Ashley Bouchard, and I'm the Program Relations Specialist here at Practice Match. Before joining Practice Match, I was an in-house physician recruiter, and in that role, I developed a true passion for helping physicians in their journey from training to employment. Here at Practice Match, I get to take that passion to the next level by offering career guidance and mentorship to physicians in training, from medical students preparing to apply for residency, all the way through helping residents and fellows find their dream job. Hopefully, since you're here tonight, you already know about Practice Match and all that we have to offer physicians. Hopefully, you're coming right on over from the career fair. But just if you don't, I want to highlight a couple of the resources my team and I have available to you so you can make sure you get the most out of your Practice Match experience. So we have a free CV builder and free expert CV review on the Practice Match website. Everything I'm getting ready to share with you is found at practicematch.com. We also have scholarships. We have a job board where you can see job postings and filter them by specialty, geographic location, visa status, student loan repayment, and more. We have virtual career fairs to connect you with employers hiring in your specialty, and you can earn some additional revenue during training for attending them, and even more additional revenue by becoming a physician promoter and encouraging your colleagues to attend.
That's cool.
We have Yeah, that is cool. Peyton Jennings is with us tonight. She actually runs that program and keeps all of our promoters going and getting them their gift cards every week after our fairs. In addition to that, we have monthly webinars on various topics regarding training, interview preparation, contract negotiation, immigration assistance, loan repayment, and more. If you think your program would benefit from a personalized training on any topic mentioned above, we can do that too. We also have a free physician immigration handbook provided by Siskin Susser, a practice path career guidebook. One of the contributors to that book is here as a presenter tonight. And we also have a network of experts in just about every physician-facing industry. So if you ever have a question related to career guidance, you can reach out to Practice Match and we will be happy to guide you. If you have questions about any of the things I mentioned above, please feel free to reach out to me. Please note that microphones will be muted throughout the presentation. We will have time for a Q&A session at the end, but also anytime during the presentation, if you have a question, please feel free to use that Q&A box or chat box. Justin likes to roll with the punches, so please feel free to ask questions as we go.
Yep.
All right, so now let's learn more about physician compensation, knowing your worth, and negotiating your contract. Justin Nabity is the founder and CEO of Physicians Thrive and also a co-founder of a nonprofit named GiveSite Global. I just learned about that company. It's very cool. He has lectured at over 100 universities, including Johns Hopkins, the Mayo Clinic, and Stanford. He's on the board of Entrepreneurs Organization and the National Association of Insurance and Financial Advisors. It's my pleasure to introduce Justin Nabity.
Thank you so much, Ashley. I really appreciate that.
You're welcome. It was a mouthful.
You got a lot to say there, didn't you? All right, let me get switched over here. Okay, just to kick off a few more details, background-wise, to share a little bit of where I'm coming from. Physicians Thrive is based in Omaha, Nebraska, and we are serving physicians in all 50 states. It was something that got started being third generation in financial services. My grandfather and my father both are in the field, and we got to see firsthand what it was like for you to go through the steps that you had to go through, getting into medical school, finishing, doing training, launching, getting that first job, and having things thrown at you left and right that were not areas that you got trained in. So we decided to do something about it to fill that gap. There's a big void in the education curriculum side of things. And so we wanted to build a process and a way for you to make sure that you got access to everything that you need to know about what comes outside of the side of providing medical care to your patients. And so the business, the legal, and the financial. My background's in finance and so international business and finance from the University of Nebraska. I also studied at Oxford University. And then my professional background's in financial planning and investment management. And what we found was the number one driving issue to help physicians get off on the right start when it comes to their finances is that they knew what they were getting themselves into when signing contracts. What you'll find is that 99% of the time, when you take a position, there will be a contract that you're going to sign. And that contract could be anywhere from 10 to 50 to 100 pages long. Some places will give you an offer letter with a few short pages, but then they'll reference a bunch of other documents. And what are you going to do? How do you make sure that you get the right type of help to know what you're signing? And those are the kind of things that we're going to be talking about tonight. So we're serving clients of every specialty, every practice type, all 50 states. And we've been doing it for about 15 years now. And I got into it also because of marrying into a family of doctors. My wife's father's a doctor, her brother's a doctor, his brother's wife is a doctor, and an uncle are doctors. And there's extended family members there's extended family members on my side that are. So our family is kind of the fusion of finance and medicine coming together. And it's with that background, we want to make sure that you get the resources that you need to be successful. And so thinking about where you are right now, whether that's just getting started, maybe you're a year out, maybe you've been in practice for 5 to 10 years, what do you need to know today to make sure that things are going to go well for you? And what it comes down to is fair compensation. How do we make sure that we're getting compensated fairly so that way it's good for me and also good for the employer? Because the employer needs to be able to afford to pay you. It needs to be good for the business can thrive, but also needs to be good for you. And so what's that ratio look like? And so we're going to get into some of those things, then also talk about some specifics with contracts and some language examples of some things that you can, because it's not always about the dollars and cents in the agreement. There's also non-financial things that are going to be a part of the picture that you'll want to have in mind. As Ashley had mentioned, feel free to open up the chat Q&A side and fire away with questions. And Ashley's going to hopefully kind of play moderator and jump in and maybe interrupt me as those come along so that way I can answer those as we're going. And then certainly at the end, we'll have some time as well to open up for questions. So let's take a quick look here at a timeline of where, if you're just getting started, what are the priorities that we should be taking care of to make sure that you are doing what you need to protect yourself. And so as you can see, number one on the list is you've got all this education, all this knowledge as you're finishing up. What happens if you can't practice? I've got a client right now who just developed ALS and things are not going well for him. I've had clients that have gotten in car accidents. We've have clients that have gotten attacked by their patients and have caused concussions and then later on found tumors on their brain and had to have them removed. And so what are you going to do to make sure that all these years of education, effort, and training doesn't go to waste? Well, that's what a disability insurance contract can do for you. It can lock in your ability to make sure that you get a guaranteed income stream, no matter what, all the way until the end of your career. So you want to make sure that you get that rolling before rates go up, because there's special discounts when you're at the institution. And it's also health sensitive. You want to do it while you're the youngest and healthiest, because all those things will come in your favor. So that's going to be a key financial item. Same thing with the life insurance piece of it. You want to make sure that you stay insurable and you get it when you still can. If you think about traveling to a different country, that could get you in trouble. If you think about hobbies that you could take on, if you think about sports or other activities, new things you want to try, those can get in the way. If you're thinking about having kids, this is really kind of a strange one to be talking about, but even if your spouse has fertility issues, that could cause you to be denied full coverage on some plans. And so you think about your compensation is only as good as it's going to be able to continue and it's going to grow. If something interrupts and derails you from being able to continue on that trajectory with your income, you've got to have a backup plan. And rarely is it the scenario where you have some business already on the side that is going to be there to support you and take you forward if you can't practice. So this is a super easy way to lock that in. As Ashley was alluding to, tons of resources with practicematch.com on the job search side of things. Getting started earlier, doing it 2 years beforehand is the ideal. The sooner that you get to having those conversations with potential employers, the better off you'll be on getting an opportunity to maybe having a stipend. We've seen many physicians lock in a stipend for 2 years, sometimes 3 years. If you know exactly where you want to go, that could be very advantageous for you. You can start making a huge dent into student loans if you have those, or maybe some other responsibilities that you have. So getting job search, getting your documents in order, Ashley mentioned that, that's key. Interview preparation resources, knowing what's important to you, having that spelled out, and then being able to bring passion, conviction, concern, care for what it is you want to be about, and really being prepped to talk about the energy you're going to bring to the table with the values and the culture that's important to you. So that way you can start to develop those synergies early on. And then we get into this compensation and contract review. This is something that is very critical because you do not want to go into a conversation with an employer if you don't know what the numbers should be. You want to be prepped and ready to go beforehand. It's important for you to know at the beginning how to think about this, how to talk about it, when to bring it up, because I get this question all the time. At what point in time, even like during an interview, should you ask about compensation? And I wonder if that's something that you're thinking about right now. And there's a little bit of an art to this. You don't want to go jumping in all aggressive on the things that could be a turnoff, right? You're trying to build a relationship, which is really the key when you're talking to a new potential partner, team that you're going to be joining. And so knowing when it's appropriate based on the cues and the conversation, how it's going and how much you're leading the conversation. We'll talk about some examples of that. Then you've had to wait all these years to get started. And now you have the income, but what do you need to make sure that you do so that way you don't find yourself kind of chained up to or imprisoned by all the new things, the house, the cars, the whatever it could be. It's really critical to make sure that the compensation is life-giving to you. It's a door opener, provides freedom to you, and you don't feel shackled after you launch into it. So having some tools that can help you, like a 50-30-20 rule, if you've ever heard of that. The 50-30-20 rule is about living off of half of your after-tax income. So 50% covers all of the regular stuff, 30% goes to savings, investment, and retirement, and then 20% goes to lifestyle and enjoyment. So you live off of 50, you save the 30, and you get to enjoy the 20. If you can be disciplined and can follow that and can use that as your formula or your filter from the income that you're receiving, it can provide a lot of freedom to you. So that way you're not having to feel like you're doing too much or not doing enough. It's a good ratio to follow. Debt management's key. Should you pay it all off first with the income that you're receiving before you save and invest and do anything? There's some key things about that. So you want to do some analysis to determine what's going to be the best course of action. And there's different forgiveness programs that you may want to consider. So that's something personally to plan for, but at the same time, your contract and the compensation plan that you have can also be impacted by what type of package they have. And they may provide you, if you, let's say, join early, 2-3 years early, there could be a loan forgiveness program where that's helping you tackle some debt stuff. And then investments and tax stuff, we'll maybe touch on that a little bit later. That's not the main focus for today, but you're going to go from this income to this income, or if you change practices, change states, there's different tax dynamics. How you are structured, one of the things that doesn't get touched on a lot during these kinds of conversations is, how do you want to structure yourself? Do you want the employer to bring you on as an employee, or do you want to be a contractor? And there's pros and cons to both of these. And I'd love to spend some time on that if you're interested to talk about it. It's good to have some contracting income on the side and find a way where it's It doesn't harm or distract you from the practice. It complements what you're doing, but then also provides you some ability to do some strategic tax planning. We had a meeting with a very successful radiation oncology practice today. They found us and said, we want to find a firm that can help us as a fractional CFO. And we brought our tax team in, and we basically showed them in like 30 minutes how they could restructure their business and save $26,000 a person per year in taxes, just of how they would restructure their business because it wasn't optimized for how it should be structured. So that's not necessarily a compensation and a contract thing, but it affects where the compensation comes from and how it trickles down to you. And because all the pieces in between, you want to be managing and taking care of, so that way, at the end of the day, you get to keep most or as much as you possibly can of what you're getting paid.
I love this slide. I want to like steal this checklist and put it in our book. I'm like, all right, here's the timeline. It's great.
Yeah, and oh, go ahead.
We actually have a question for you already.
Good, yeah.
And it's probably leading into your next topic. If we are, let me know. We can answer it then. But without having access to MGMA data, what's the best way to compare apples to apples? In parentheses, I don't want to waste time with a potential employer if they're way off and with a lowball offer.
Yeah.
Who do we talk to? Contract attorney, etc.
Well, you could just Google search the 2022 Physician Compensation Report by Physicians Thrive, and it will give you all kinds of data.
I was hoping you would tell us about that.
Yeah, the Physician Compensation Report is something that we produced in January, and we'll be producing it from here on forward. We're researching every single source that's out there and giving you as much as we can. Some of it may not be as specific to your situation, which is where you can reach out to us. You can contact us. We can do a little sidebar conversation to get into some details, but you can download that report. It's accessible online, and every database has its strength and weakness. There's no one size perfect solution for everything. Not every employer is participating with every single system that's out there. And a lot of the practices that are there that should be represented aren't represented. And that doesn't give you a full picture. I can tell you in the last 4 months, we've seen improvement of over $1 million in compensation for our clients. We've got a process where we help review and guide and work with employers. And employers actually love working with us. It's actually easier to work with us than it is to work with the incoming doctor, because we're talking business people to business people. We're not talking to the person who's not as experienced with it. And so there's a lot of room there to help get the employer to know exactly where the numbers are and where the numbers are going. So that way they can make sure they're being competitive, because the last thing that an employer wants is for you to join and then you leave in a short period of time, because the cost of turnover is extremely expensive. And I have a stat here in a little while that we'll talk about with turnover. Turnover is the biggest problem when it comes to the financial piece of building and maintaining a team. So there's MGMA, there's Sullivan Cotter, there's AMGA, then there's a bunch of other sources out there. And so we've been aggregating and reviewing and collecting and analyzing all of them. And so there's even some specialty, like some special niche groups that are not reflective in other specialties that we will also incorporate. We're producing guides on our website specifically for your specialty that goes into some of the different unique strands of your specialty. So you can check that out too on our website. You can search for it if you go to our search bar at physiciansthrive.com, and there'll be some data there. But then again, talking to us, we can take you deeper into data. I have a slide that I'll show you in a little bit that has some compensation data, but it doesn't give you everything that you need to know. There's so many different degrees of the data that you can tap into. So hopefully that covers it. Any other follow-up questions on that, Ashley?
There is another, it's not on that, just so you know, I did share the link to your compensation report in the chat, so everybody has that. But the other question is the 50-30-20 rule based off of gross or net income? It's
net. It's your take home. Great question. Yeah, it's hard to plan off of the gross. If you do percentages off the gross, what do you actually have left over? It gets really kind of weird. So we do everything that we can to take your tax rate and lower it down. So that way, as much as you can get passed through does. And then there's a trade-off, because there's certain things you can do with pre-tax dollars to take tax deductions. And there's certain things that are going to be better, that are going to be post-tax, tax-free growth type of sources. And if any of you have been watching what's been going on with our federal deficit and our federal debt, it's never been this bad before. It's the worst it's ever been in the history of our country. It's out of control. And so that's important to be planning ahead for the future, because if you have 10 or more years left to go, how you're planning for taxes when you take distributions, you take withdrawals from retirement accounts, that's really going to be key. And I could spend a whole separate conversation on that. And so maybe we'll dig into that a little bit more later on. As far as, again, we want to make sure you're getting paid the right numbers, that you get to then keep as much as you can after doing proactive tax planning, and then being able to manage it so that way you get to have the lifestyle that you want to have and the freedom that you want to have. So that way things can become optional for you when you're ready for them to be optional. Not that you are in a situation where you're forced to do things for longer. Let it be, continue to be a joy, a passion, something that your heart is behind long term, rather than feeling like you have to do it out of obligation. So we've got this titled interview questions, and this could be post-interview. This could be in the midst of, if you're thinking about, okay, if I don't have access to MGMA data, what else can I use to go into talking to an employer? It could be that you, for whatever reason, let's say you didn't remember me, or didn't remember Physicians Thrive, or didn't remember Ashley, because Ashley could tell you that we could help, get you some data. If for some reason you forgot all that, you can go into the conversation and not give numbers. Sometimes employers will say, how much would you have to get paid to join our practice? What number would you require? And physicians make a lot of mistakes when they answer that question. And this is a negotiation. This is a business situation. And so employers don't typically start out with their best offer. That's just not how negotiations work. Any class on negotiations you go to, it just doesn't work that way. And so it could be that you're still researching, you've got offers coming in, you're still evaluating. You don't have to commit to a number, but I'm going to give you enough resources today that you're not going to have to go into a conversation like that blindly, but you want to know what the range is, and also what you have as a capacity, because your capacity might be higher or might be lower than what your peers are. And certainly if you can produce more and can drive more revenue than your peers, then it should be rewarded in kind. And if it's less than, and you desire more, a different type of pace, then the numbers might be different. And so that's going to be kind of something that you want to weigh. Now, there's many different elements to compensation. There's signing bonuses, there's base comp, there's bonuses, there's relocation incentives, there's other thresholds that may unlock other aspects, there's allowances for certain things. So there's a whole realm of areas to tap into. And so you want to get as much details about those as you can. Get a copy of the benefits booklet. The benefits can be worth a significant amount. Some of the larger employers really can kick in an extra $50,000 per year in value to you that you wouldn't be able to get at other places. And sometimes that just may not be the right fit for you. So you've got to take into account all those different pieces. The termination and retirement piece, that's something that you don't really get into a whole lot during the interview. You want to save those types of talking points to when you get into the contract, and you can have a third party help you address those. The performance piece, is your compensation going to be driven based off of your individual production? Is it based on the team all together collectively? Are you incentivized individually or as a group? And what's the effect of that going to be? Is everybody paid the same regardless of production? I know many physicians that have come to us that they're just not happy because they're pulling the weight and they're not getting recognized for it. And it doesn't last. And so expectations that you have, expectations that they have, having an open conversation, having the relationship with them so you can be talking about those things. Financial stability is a piece of this. If you're looking to join a practice that's just getting started, or hasn't been around very long, or you're the first one to launch the department of the practice, what type of resources have they already stocked away? What type of reserves do they have? Do they have the capacity to support launching these new initiatives? Because they could be testing out some new things that is really high risk for you. And it could be high reward too. Maybe there's an ownership element that you could pick up as a part of this. So it's a little bit of give and take, but you want to understand what those dynamics are. Scheduling is an issue when it comes to your compensation, because what about call? What about extra shifts? What about if you were going to decide that you were wanting to go do a missions trip every year? How's that going to affect the practice? Is the culture in the practice, are they amenable to that? Do they support that? Are they, you've got to kind of get a sense of your personal life passions. Do they align with them? And is there enough support to look out for each other? Is it a family type of environment? Is everybody sharing call and the scheduling evenly? Is it the same across the board? What type of a teamwork environment do they have? And then organizational structure is an area that is key, because decision-making, authority, changes, concerns, sharing feedback. Is it a once a year sort of thing? Do you have any say? Are you able to influence this much of the environment, or can you have an impact on this much? And what examples have they provided in the past? Because you might be somebody who has a lot of leadership, a lot of ideas, a lot of things that can be brought to the table. It could be that your last year has really equipped you to bring some unique things to the table that you want to impact the environment. And is it going to be receptive to you influencing the environment? Those are all going to be key things, and it can affect your compensation. Your compensation could warrant seeing some changes there, or it could be that you negotiate some terms that if you were to pursue this and achieve this, that some doors open up. All that stuff is on the table. It's a lot of times what will happen is that a physician will go and talk to an employer, and they'll get the impression that this is the way it is, and that's the way it will always be. And in our experience, when we bring in the latest and what's going on in the trends, employers are very receptive, and we tend to update their contract for them. We actually do a lot of the contract work on their behalf, because we're helping them level up where things should be as an industry, because they have maybe fallen behind, or they haven't had their new hires know to ask for certain things or to do certain things. And so they've kind of fallen behind. And so we'll go into places where we'll lead their attorney and help their attorney know that this language should be updated here or there to be appropriate for what's going on in the market. Okay, so let me share with you an example of some compensation here. So to give you a little bit of a overview, there's going to be different percentiles where a certain number of physicians, this is just one of many that we could pull. So I'm just picking on pain management for tonight. There's going to be a certain number of providers that are sharing compensation data here, which is what produces this. There has to be at least 5, and anything more than 5, then data will be provided. You can see down here, there weren't 5 or more that work in the rural location to provide compensation for these percentiles. So some of the data is missing different pieces, but you've got your total compensation, which includes everything. You've got different percentiles, which should be based on different types of work volume. There's regions and what they are per region. There is the type of ownership, the type of practice that it is, the size of population, and then work RVUs. This is an area that doesn't get touched on a lot. RVU is the relative value unit. It's the measurement of the difficulty, the complexity, and the time of providing that care to your patient. And so you can see that the median volume is in that range. Well, if you're going to be producing more than the median, then that should be something that's reflected in the numbers. If you're producing less than the median, that should also be reflected. So you can see based on the different regions and the ownership types, all those different things affect those regions. And then you can get down into here and you can see what the collections are. Collections is the total revenue that the practice is bringing in on behalf of your billings. And so is your revenue commensurate with what you're getting paid? Is it behind what you're getting paid? There's some adjusting that should take place over time, so that way it's fair. Having things be fair is key, because again, you want the employer to be able to be healthy, and the employer wants you to be healthy. You want it to be a win-win situation for both of you. Otherwise, you're not going to stay, or they're not going to be able to keep you. So it's kind of a fine line, delicate sort of balance that needs to be taken. And it's not just a cookie cutter, here's what it should be, here's a number, here's how it is, and just plug it in the box, and that's all there is to it. So it's way more involved than that. So this is different than the guaranteed starting salary or some of those other bonuses that you have out there. This is just one aspect. Now, this doesn't go into states. We can sidebar into having a conversation around more specifics with states. One of the beauties of Physicians Thrive is that we work with so many physicians that we have a dozen contracts that you weren't given, but could kind of almost surrogate be given to you in comparison to your 1, 2, or 3 contracts that you've gotten. So that means that you can do some comparisons, you can do some evaluation, you can do some analysis. We recommend that you have hopefully 2 or 3 offers just to get a feel for what might be the best fit for you. And if you maybe got to a situation where you only had 1, you could borrow some of the ones that we have. Everything's confidential, the employer is confidential, and the candidate who was offered is confidential. All that stays confidential, but you can get a feel for what's going on to get a sense of, is this within the ballpark of what it should be? Let's go back over here. So I mentioned turnover being a big issue. And if almost half of doctors are looking to leave in the next 3 years, that's not good for business. It's not good for employers. It's not good for culture. The big reasons why that we're hearing, and while these numbers are a little bit dated, we have some more recent data that is still in agreement with these numbers. Even family dynamics, family changes can play a huge part in this in the future. So having that in mind, as far as what do I want to be doing in 5, 10 years from now as my family's going to be developing, if that's part of the planning for you. Take a look at this example. This is a contract that had some language in it, and we started out with the top paragraph here. And then we were able to go through the process of getting some revisions made, so that way it was going to help you in your dynamic with the employer. So it says that the employee shall abide by and comply with the terms of the hospital agreements. In the event of a conflict between the provisions of this employment agreement and the provisions of the hospital agreements, the hospital agreement controls. So what is that saying? If something happens, this is actually a 3-party agreement. This is you, a group, and a hospital together. Many hospitals will provide incentives and provide a part of the financial package to get you to join the group, because the group that works there works inside the hospital, and they get ancillary revenues from you being as a part of that group. And so they want to have more providers be a part of the system because it's good for them. Well, if something happens between you and the group, or something happens between the group and the hospital, it could be that now it's you and the hospital together are going to be subject to these terms. And most physicians don't look at these additional agreements. So anytime that your contract says that you're going to be agreeing to other terms and other documents, you have to have those documents and review those and make sure you understand the implications of them. And it still might be a reasonable outcome that you can pursue it. But if you go down to the bottom here, the second bullet, we were able to insert this where it says, in the event of a conflict between the provisions of this agreement and the provisions of the hospital agreement, the employee shall renegotiate the terms of this agreement to comply with the hospital agreements. And that just makes sure that it's a win-win for both you and the employer. So we have a conversation about it rather than it just being a default position where it just happens and then you're not, in a place where you're going to be content long-term. And then at the bottom here, if no agreement can be reached, then either party may terminate without cause within 30 days. It helps provide some freedom there. So we find that in most cases, we can come to a place where the language can be modified in such a way where it's reasonable for both parties and can be a win-win for both you and the employer. Here's another example. We'll focus on the bulleted, the bulleted item here. We're talking about the malpractice insurance. What happens if you leave or there's a termination event and you're no longer there and a patient comes back and files a claim against you for something that you did or didn't do? Are you going to be personally responsible for that? Or does the malpractice insurance cover it? Does it not cover it? What happens? And this might be something you're familiar with. If you're not, then in this case, the employer is saying they'll cover 2 years of tail coverage if it's terminated for any reason. The any reason thing is actually really good. The 2 years could be good, may not be all the way that you want it to be, but the fact that they'll cover it for any reason, that provides some nice protection. This was what the language was that we got in the first place. And so this is pretty favorable. And this is a big deal when it comes to your compensation, because one of the things that can happen is if you leave a practice, the last thing that you're going to want to do is have to write a big check. Like, who wants to write a check? A going away, it's like one thing to get a going away present. Like, you're going to give the employer a going away present. You're going to write a check back to them, $10,000, $20,000, $30,000. Like, that's not the way you want to exit and go to somewhere new. Now, there's things you can do joining a new place that can help offset some of that. We can kind of guide you through those steps, but this is a key area where you want to try to avoid this if possible. And it's about where and the location and other restrictive issues that we'll get another example of this that you can see here in a little bit. But this is an example where it kind of goes both ways. It can be favorable, or maybe it's not favorable, and adjustments need to be made. Ashley, how about you read this one?
You want me to read it?
Yeah, you read it.
Let me move my face out of the way.
Okay.
Accordingly, professional covenants and agrees that he will not, for a period of 2 years following the termination of this agreement for any reason whatsoever, including termination without cause, engage in the practice of ... within a 15-mile radius of any facility listed on Exhibit A.
So what are the highlights there?
Non-compete. I mean, you can't work anywhere else within 15 miles for 2 years.
2 years.
Including termination without cause.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean,
without cause. So any type of, if you leave voluntarily, if they have you leave for whatever reason, if you do something bad, they do something bad, doesn't matter. Whatever the case is, that's what's going to happen. Now, for an employer tuning in here, I agree that these are important. A physician or me joining a place would say, I don't like these. These are not good for me coming in. It's very expensive to launch a business, to maintain a business, and to protect a business. It's very expensive. So there is a place, and it can be appropriate to have these types of provisions in a contract. So most contracts are going to have this in there. It's a matter of getting to the place where it's reasonable for you and the employer. Sometimes you're not going to get to an agreement, and that's okay. And many times you will be able to. There's a justification for it. And then there's places like North Dakota that don't have them, or they're not enforceable. And some places they're not enforceable in some conditions. I've had many people say, well, if you go to California, they're not enforceable in California. That's actually not true. It depends on the type of practice, and it depends on what happens. So if these are in most contracts, they're not just in there just for extra billable time. Now, a lot of attorneys will just put extra language in a contract for billable time purposes, but there is a basis for these, and there's a way to work through these. We do it all the time. It's no big deal for us, and it shouldn't be a big deal for you. So it's possible to modify this into a shorter radius, like a smaller radius, a shorter time frame, the types of conditions that would cause the termination to occur. There's a way to get this to a place that's reasonable. And more than happy to brainstorm ideas with you on how to make that happen. So then other areas to mention, we talked about loan repayment, student loans. We see some contracts, well, they'll provide you your down payment money to buy or build your first home. and there's going to be some clauses in the contract about that. Those are some nice incentives to join. So there's usually strings attached with those. And so you want to make sure you understand what those strings are within them. Moving you from where you are to where the practice is, they should cover the cost to have you go out to visit them. It's a cost of doing business. They should also cover the cost of getting you out there. It's not a big deal. Everywhere does it. If they don't have it in the contract, you just have to ask for it. And we get it all the time. And it's not unusual in other industries. So it's pretty standard across the board, especially in your case. Other incentives like signing bonuses, commencement bonuses, we mentioned stipends are in there. A lot of times it might be that there's no patient base and you have to build one from scratch. Well, that can be kind of scary. They might have a guarantee for a year. What happens after the year's over? What if you didn't get enough patients coming to see you? At year one, it's over. You're paid this much if you bring nothing in that month. You're paid a lot if you bring a lot in a month. Like every month that you are going along the way, you've got to be monitoring and watching how your billings and collections are going and seeing, are you on pace to maintain your income going forward? This is a huge mistake. Get access to the data, be monitoring it monthly. You are now needing to put on a business hat. You are a business person now. Even though they might be taking care of things for you, you've got to put it on and start keeping yourself accountable to production and numbers, especially when you're starting fresh in a place where you're not taking over for somebody who's leaving or isn't exiting after a long career. I didn't touch on outside consulting too much, but there's a lot of revenue potential here. And as long as it's not going to conflict with what you're doing at the practice, a lot of places like this. This is good PR for the business. It gives them more ability to get out there, and it can be a win-win for both you and the employer. If you have something that you're thinking about developing, you want to be ready to have that ahead of time. We have a client who's, I'd love to put a little special plug for Dr. Amanatullah. He built some artificial intelligence with his team, and they're literally changing the way that the operating room works. They have technology that nobody else has, and it counts all the surgery instruments in the surgery room in a way that nothing else has. And it's now going to give employers the type of tracking that doesn't exist today. It's killer. If you want to learn more about that, I'd love to share a little video on it. And he was able to partner with Stanford to build that tech, and as far as getting patents going and having them support. And it's great for Stanford. Stanford's going to have a lot of upshot from it, as well as them supporting Derek and Derek's team. And it's amazing. And so as you're thinking about bringing ideas like that to the table, those will come in handy. Your time off is also indirect compensation. It's built in. There's a certain amount of weeks, certain amount of days that you can have scheduled. There's also sick time off. So those things need to be factored into the equation, making sure it's fair and reasonable. And maybe you want more time off and you're willing to give up some compensation. There's some give and take there, and that's totally reasonable. And then the rest of their benefits package and the retirement package, getting those details. Do they have profit sharing? Profit sharing can add up to a lot. You can increase your compensation by a lot more by them doing profit sharing and additional contributions into your plan and having access to those. A little sidebar: if you can open up your own LLC and have the employer hire you as the LLC, you can do even more with retirement planning. And it can be just as good or better for the employer because it costs them less to have you hired that way, because they don't have the FICA taxes. It's less expensive to do that, but there needs to be a reasonable basis to do it. So those are some examples of some things that you can incorporate into the conversation.
Justin, that leads me to a question we have. One of the attendees asked, do you have a list of interview questions that you can share?
We do. We have the employment guide. We have the guide to all the questions for interviewing, evaluating, and negotiating employment offers. And if you send us a note, we'll get you a copy of that guide. We have so many guides on our website. Our website is the most robust library of resources. If you go into our search bar and search any topic, we have guides for almost everything. So you can access that there, or shoot me a note and I can get you a copy of it. We love teaching. If this is something that you're not getting or haven't gotten, or you've maybe moved on past your institution and could share this with those that are coming up behind you, we'd love to do a talk on anything that we've touched on in this segment with your group. If you, like I said, if you're an alumni member of a program, or you want to have us speak at an association, we speak at associations on a regular basis. Education is huge for us, and we know that you can do way more when you're equipped with the resources and the tools. That way you can go into things confidently. So feel free to reach out anytime through our website. There might be a quick way to throw my email address in the chat. Let's see if I can do that. And I'm a big text message guy. Shoot me a text, super easy way to reach me. Our teams are crazy about FaceTime. We do FaceTime everything. So feel free to reach out to us for video calls. Anytime, any place, we're available.
Love that. And then we have another question here too. Do you guys do mock interviews at Physicians Thrive?
You know, we don't do mock interviews, but we'll go through all the different types of scenarios and things that will come up. So that way you're equipped to them, all kind of the awkward things. If you've got a situation that you need to address, we can talk through that. If you got something that you're really excited about, or you're concerned about coming across as too cocky or too arrogant about it, we can help you kind of think through how to strategically bring that up. Like, we want to see you be successful. We want to see you get launched into the right position. So happy to help with those things.
Perfect.
Well, thanks for your time. It's fun being able to chat with you, and I'll be here if you want to hang out a little bit longer, and feel free to throw down some questions, and we'll dig right into them.
All right. We've answered the ones here. Anyone else have more questions? Oh, will this recording be available for later from Dr. Williams? Yes, it certainly will. And it will be posted on our website as well. I can give you the link to where you'll be able to find that tomorrow.
Awesome.
All right.
Thanks,
Well,
Ashley.
thank you, Justin. I appreciate your time.
Yep.
Everybody has Justin's contact information. I will send that out to you in a follow-up email tomorrow as well. Thank you all for attending. And if you enjoyed this webinar, we have more coming up. June 14th, we have CV preparation, how to write a professional and effective curriculum vitae. And on July 12th, we have an introduction to locum tenens, how it works and why you should try it. So hope to see you there. Again, if anyone else has any questions, don't hesitate to reach out or put them in the chat. All right. Oh, one more came in, but it's for the recorded session too. So I will answer these, and Justin, we'll let you get back to your evening. Thank you so much.
Right. Yep. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bear with me. I'm just trying to get you guys this link here. This is where you'll be able to find it. Have a good evening.